What's up guys, it's John from Outlier. We've just launched our exclusive membership, the Outlier Chinese Mastery Community. This community was made for people who want to get serious about improving their Chinese. Learning Chinese is a huge and complex project, and there are a lot of aspects that just don't get covered in most classes. You're basically left to figure things out for yourself. This video on how to fix your tones is a sample of the type of content you'll get access to each week as a member. So if you like what you see here, click the link in the description to join our community. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Ash.
Hey everybody, this is Ash, and here we are, and we're going to talk about tones and how to fix your tones. So I want to start off with a kind of high level, philosophical aspect, because that way you'll know how to make decisions when you're trying to figure out how to do things. Okay, so from the philosophical standpoint, what you want to do when you're learning a language, and it doesn't matter what language, it doesn't matter what you're learning, you want to be imitating native speakers. The traditional school way of learning a language is basically you memorize a bunch of words by reading them, and then you memorize a bunch of grammar rules, and then also by reading them, and then you put these two together in your head, and that language is supposed to come out. But that isn't actually what's going to happen. If you learn languages like that, you're probably going to have bad pronunciation, and you're probably going to have bad grammar, because when you're making decisions, you're going to be using your native language as a guide, right? And you don't want to do that, because you want to be, you can't, for instance, you can't learn Chinese by doing everything the English way. You have to do things the Chinese way, right? Well, you don't know how to do the things the Chinese way. So the only way that you have left is to imitate the Chinese way. So this applies to everything, but here specifically we want to talk about tones, right? Okay, one of the big themes is going to be owning your tones. Now, what does it mean to own your tones? If you think of a sound, of a tone, and you speak it correctly without thinking about it, in other words, without thinking about the process of how to say that tone, you just think of the syllable you want to say, and it comes out of your mouth naturally, and it comes out correctly, that means you own your tones. That means your thought and your mouth and your tongue and what you want to say, all these things are aligned, right? A lot of people, they have the pinyin spelling in their head. And for instance, like SHI, which is like sh, right? So that could be sh, 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 sh. But if you're thinking of SHI, and then you're thinking of a tone contour, like is it this way, is it this way, is it this way? You're doing it wrong. Okay, that is not going to work. Once again, you're going from yourself. You're going from your own understanding, and you're not going from the language that you're trying to learn. So instead of doing that, what you want to do is to be spending a lot of time listening and imitating tones. And you might say, well, I don't hear it. Well, that's fine. I mean, people that are learning to play the guitar don't already know how to play the guitar, right? If I already knew how to play a guitar, I wouldn't be taking guitar lessons. So same thing with tones. If you can't hear it, that's not a reason to not learn it or not a reason to stop learning. It just means that you haven't done enough listening. So when you're practicing your tones, you want to listen to native speakers and then think to yourself, what are they doing with their mouth to make that sound? And then constantly be thinking of what they're saying and what you're saying, and what is the difference between these two, and how do I bridge the gap? How do I make what I'm saying sound more like what they're saying? And you don't have to get it all in one time. If you can just get the tone down or just get the initials down, well, it doesn't matter. Just you want to get something down. In fact, it's better to focus on one thing. And once you get that one thing down and you keep saying it over and over and over again, then start on another sound within that same syllable, right? So you listen to, like, say, if you're new to Chinese and you can't, like, for instance, you have this problem. How high does the second tone go? Right? If you're asking yourself that question, your problem is you have not heard the second tone enough times. So how do you solve that? You take an audio sample of a native speaker saying the second tone, and then you just sit there and you repeat and repeat and repeat until you can make your sound mostly like them. Of course, what percentage you're going to sound like them depends on your goals for Chinese, right? If you want to have a native speaker accent, well, then you need to sit there and do it over and over and over again until you have it perfect. But if you're like, hey, I just want to be clearly understood, well, that's fine. I mean, that's a good goal for language learning, to be understood by the person you're talking to. Then, if you get within 90-95%, then you're doing pretty good, right? And as you can imagine, it takes less effort to get to 90% than it does to get to 100%. So to summarize that section, owning your tone means you think of a syllable in your head and it comes out of your mouth with virtually no effort. That's when you know you own the tone. If you're still trying to think, you're trying to add the tone onto a syllable and you're thinking of lines, or you're trying to move your hand, you don't own the tone. The tone owns you. So what you want to do is own your tones. Okay, so what are some signs that you don't own your tone? So I've already actually basically mentioned all of them. One, the way you're thinking about your tone is that it's some add-on to the syllable, right? So you're thinking of, P-I-N-G, oh, I need to add a second tone, right? If you own your tones, you should be thinking ping. You shouldn't be thinking of P-I-N-G plus a tone. And if you talk to native speakers, you'll discover this is the way they think about tones. For them, ping and ping are completely two different things. They're not ping plus or So you don't always have to match a native speaker's thought process, but in this particular case, it's what you want to do. You want to think about tones the way they do. You don't want to separate the tone and the sound. So other basically characteristics are like you're drawing your finger through the air, and if you ever, I don't know, once you get your ear trained to the tones, you'll find out most people that are doing this, their hand doesn't match what they're saying. So they'll be like, "wa," or "ta," right, which should be "ta." So doing this finger thing, it's something I think Chinese teachers teach people to do, but I personally don't see the value in it. What you really need to be doing is imitating native speakers' speech. Another sign that you haven't owned your tones yet is that when you're trying to say the tone, you're thinking in your mind of some picture. And you see these tone diagrams on the internet in your textbook. And if you're trying to produce a tone by thinking of that picture instead of thinking of that sound, then you're on the wrong track. You haven't owned your tones yet. Like I said before, the only way you can effectively learn a language is to imitate native speakers. So you want to sit there and listen to the native speakers say the second tone over and over and over again until you get it right. And it's not the picture in your mind, it's the sound. You want to hear that sound. You want to hear that native speaker sound in your head and then reproduce it. So if that native speaker sound isn't already in your head, then you're not going to be able to say it right, because that having that sound in your head is the model you're trying to follow. Well, then the obvious question becomes, how do you get the sound in your head? Hint, it's not by reading. You have to imitate native speakers. So get in there and imitate. And if you're sick of it, then keep doing it anyway. I mean, think of any basketball player, anybody that does anything with muscles, right? Because this is a muscle. It's both an auto, sound. It's also a muscle memory. Like your mouth will remember how to say the sound correctly. And I mean, there aren't any professional golf players that don't practice golf all the time. There aren't any professional tennis players that don't practice tennis, right? The only way they get good at something is to do it over and over again. Well, that's not correct. The only way to get good at something is to do it correctly over and over again, right? Okay, so how do you practice your tones, right? I mean, you want to practice so that you get good. So you don't want to practice the wrong way. If you practice actually the wrong sounds, you're only getting better at saying it wrong, right? So we want to get better at saying it correctly. And as I said before, the only way to do that is to imitate. So you want to start out with the 4 basic tones or the 5 tones, if you want to count the qingsheng as another tone. But you want to start out practicing those individually. And I would recommend practice that first tone on a ton of different syllables. So practice ping, practice sh, practice whatever. Just practice all these different syllables with that tone. And then do the second tone for all those syllables. And then do the third tone for all those syllables. And do the fourth tone for all those syllables. And once you get good at that you feel confident, okay? Now, one thing also to keep in mind while you're doing that is that when tones get into another word, in other words, they get into an environment, they change sounds. Okay, English does this too. English words change sound in the middle of a sentence, right? So, like, for instance, have. When have is a grammatical word, it can be in a sentence. Like, I would have gone is literally I would have gone, right? But you're not saying I would have gone. You say I would have gone because that's just the way people speak, right? Well, Chinese is the same. So when you're saying something in isolation, it may be different than when it gets into a word or a sentence or a phrase. So when you're saying these tones, remember that they're not always going to be exactly the same as you're doing it, but still you need to know how to say them in isolation. So it's a good practice. Now, once you're comfortable and good at saying tones in isolation, you want to move on to pairs. So you want to do 1-1 combination, 1-2, 1-3, 1-4, 2-1, 2-2, 2-3, 2-4, all the way through all the tones. You want it. People that are good at tones, they're good at them because they've practiced them a bunch. They've said them a bunch. They've said them such that they've become a habit. And as John says in our pronunciation course, you don't practice something until you get it right. You practice it until you can't get it wrong. So this is how much of a nerd I am. Okay. I used to work at NASA and I would play basketball in the NASA gym on Fridays. And, in order to get better at basketball, I went out and bought a book on basketball. It's pretty nerdy, I admit it, but, what I learned something very important though in this book. And he talked about practicing your free throw. And he said a lot of people go out and they say, I'm going to go do 20 or 30 or 40 free throws. And they go out there and they do their 20, 30, 40 free throws. He said that absolutely is not the way to do it. The way to do it such that you'll actually improve is that you want to tell yourself, I'm going to go do free throws until I get 5 of them correct in a row, or maybe 10 correct in a row, whatever, however hardcore you want to be. So let's just go with 5 as an example. So I go out there and I shoot, say I get 4 in a row, but then I miss the next one. Well, I got to keep going. And I don't put a time limit on it. I just keep practicing until I get 5 in a row. And the reason that this is an effective way to do things is it's the act of doing it correctly 5 times in a row. That's when your learning is actually happening. That's when you know that you've controlled this, you're controlling the muscles to do the free throws, or in our case, saying our tones, your mouth muscles, have done the thing correctly enough times in a row that it starts to get this muscle memory. And that's when you really start getting better at your tones. Okay, once you've gotten your isolated tones and your 2-tone pairs down, there are some three-tone combinations where things change, so you might want to go over those. But also go start doing phrases, like short 2-second phrases, maybe 3-second phrases. And what I like to do is take speech recorded from a movie, right? So it's actually some native Chinese speaker speaking, or maybe even better, like a talk show or something where they're just naturally, they're not even reading it. They're not even memorizing lines. They're just talking normally. And get a 2 or 3 second thing and then listen to it 1,000 times. Now, of course, you don't want to do it 1,000 times in a row. You'd probably go insane, but I do 5-minute intervals. Like every day I'll do 5 minutes on that phrase until I've hit 1,000, which sometimes takes 3 days, sometimes takes 4, 5, 6, 7 days, depending on how long or short your phrase is. But that really, when you start doing these phrases, when you start chorusing phrases, it really gets you into not just the intonation, but the rhythm of the language. So your speech starts to sound a lot more natural to native speakers. And then another thing that's really good to do is memorize or practice on common phrases. Right? If you practice on some phrase you're never going to get to use, obviously that's not good. Conversely, if you practice on a phrase like, hello, my name's Bob, or whatever, if you practice on that phrase every time, if you practice it and perfect that phrase, when you meet somebody and you say, hello, my name's Bob, they're really going to be impressed with your pronunciation. So you definitely want to practice those common phrases. So one question that comes up is going to be, well, how do I know when I can stop practicing? Well, I mean, when you own your tones, when you can think of a syllable and it comes out of your mouth with very little effort, and you think it comes out of your mouth, you've owned that tone. Now, when you stop practicing, I mean, it could also be the case that, say, you've done your practice, and then you're 2 or 3 years down the road, but you kind of say it slightly wrong each time, and then the next time it gets a little bit, and so these errors start creeping into your speech. Well, if that happens, then you need to go back and you need to review this stuff. So, review is something that you might need to do, but it just depends on how good of a feel you have for it. And the more you spend time with it, the more imitation you do, the better you're going to get. Okay, so if you're in a situation where you're fixing your tones, that means that you already have bad habits developed. You're going to have to practice a lot in order to because basically what you're literally doing is, say, as of today, I've said, I've said that word 6,000 times and I'm saying it wrong. If I want to say that word correctly, then I'm going to have to get 6,000 times of saying it correctly in order just to get even, right? Now, it sounds probably terrifying to think every word you got to say 6,000 times. So it doesn't really work like that. It's more like once you get the fourth tone down, like you're very comfortable with the fourth tone, then your chances of saying shit wrong decrease. So all your practice adds together to help you. And like someone once told me, if they're speaking Chinese and they notice while they're having a conversation with somebody, hey, I messed up. I said this word wrong. When they leave the conversation, they say out loud, and it's important to say it out loud because you're doing this muscle training. They say that word the correct way 20 times, because that 20 times is supposed to counteract the bad habit from when it came out wrong. Because that's why it's coming out wrong. Because either you're not paying attention to what you're doing, or you haven't owned your tones yet, or for whatever reason. It's really funny too. Once your tones actually get better and they're on average correct, when you say a word with the wrong tone, it really affects the people listening to you. There's this coffee shop in Taipei, and I went in there one day and I said some word. I didn't even remember what the word was. But just say it was like, "Whoa, man." And I said, "Whoa, man." Like I switched the tones around. And when I said that, like everybody listening, there was like 4 or 5 people, and they went, "Whoa." And I was like, oops, I must have said something wrong. So anyway, when I walked away from that conversation, I said that word correctly 20 times in a row to kind of smash down the incorrect stuff. Yeah, so the point here is it's like fixing your golf swing. It's a muscle thing, so you're just gonna have to work at it, put in that time and practice until you overcome the incorrect way of doing it. Another thing to keep in mind is that doing a little bit every day is much better than doing a lot one day a week. And also keep in mind, this is a time thing. Like somebody in one of our classes was telling me, oh yeah, I was trying to do it for an hour a day, doing coursing, like doing an hour a day. I would literally go insane before I got to the first hour. For me, I do 5 minutes a day. Like right now, my personal habit is I do 5 minutes on Mandarin, doing coursing sentences, and then I do 5 minutes on Cantonese. And that's it. That's all the coursing I do in a day. So doing that 5 minutes, but I make sure to do it every day. So I'm doing 5 minutes on those 2 languages every day. And you really start to notice improvement when you make this a habit. Okay. So if you're trying to do 8 hours on Saturday, it's not going to work as well because it's not as your body and your mind are into rhythms. So if you have it in your rhythm to do this every day, and then doing it while you're doing it as part of the rhythm of your day, you'll start to see improvements. But you're gonna have to be patient too. It's not gonna be something you're gonna be able to solve all your problems in 1 week. Depending on how bad your problems are, it could take a year to fix it. But if any work you can do on it, you're gaining clarity in your speech, which is better for you and better for the people that you talk to in Chinese. Well, I guess that's all for today. See ya.
All right, guys, I hope you found that valuable. We'll be releasing this type of content every week to our members. practical, actionable advice on every aspect of learning Chinese. We'll also have a discussion community where you can chat with other learners, share resources and tips, ask questions, and more. So to join us, just click the link in the description.